We began this process over a year ago knowing that we can't predict the future and that Angelenos deserve to be protected no matter who is in power at the local level and at the federal government. While this body had previously passed a resolution declaring Los Angeles a city of sanctuary in 2017, those policies were not codified into municipal law. Our current relationship with federal immigration agencies is shaped by internal LAPD policies, some of which have been there for decades, and an executive directive issued by former Mayor Eric Garcetti. And these policies have been good and important to ensure that Angelenos feel safe here calling on the city for support and calling on city resources to meet their needs. But it does mean that at the flip of a switch or the change of an administration, these policies can be rescinded. Evidence has shown, studies have shown over and over again that when there are heightened fears around immigration enforcement, immigrant communities are more reluctant to call on the city for help, to ask our city for resources, even in cases of domestic violence and other emergencies, even in cases of urgent need. We must be a city that ensures that Angelenos are able to lean on it for help. And this new ordinance would codify this approach and give it the force of law. And I want to thank you all for your support in passing this unanimously last year, and I hope that we can do the same today at a very changed moment in our country's history. Thank you.
Councilwoman Rodriguez, followed by Councilmember Price.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I was a member of the council during the first Trump administration. A few of us were here during that time. And we know that so often members of our community, of our immigrant community, are, even without this administration, have lived in fear and have consequently been among those with the highest rates of underreporting of crime or assaults or violence against them out of fear for these very circumstances. It's why the Los Angeles Police Department has honored, going back to the 1970s, Special Order 40, that prohibits the cooperative relationship with federal immigration agencies. This was, again, reinforced in 2017, as Ms. Rahman indicated, by Mayor Garcetti with Executive Order 20. And so we're talking about really, we're not talking about very substantive changes, but we are still talking about the same underlying fear that is affecting so many of our communities. And it's for that reason that I'm proud to have been a part of this council when we introduced an interim control ordinance that refused the cooperation with many of the facilities that were separating families. We prohibited those activities from occurring in the city of Los Angeles. There have been a host of efforts that we have engaged in because we recognize the duress of so many members of our community. And we don't have a safer city if people are living in fear and hiding in the shadows and unable to come forward and cooperate with law enforcement in manners that we need them to, particularly because we want to keep them safe. We want to ensure that they are cooperative and communicating with law enforcement officials to make sure that if they are either the victims or the witness of a crime, their testimony is going to be instrumental to making sure that this city is safer for everyone. I also want to uplift and thank some of our other city departments that have been doing God's work in this. From our LA Library Department, who also provides a host of resources and points of access for people to be able to garner information, to our Community Investment for Families Department, and providers like MALDEF, Chirla, Carecen, Clínica Romero, and so many others. They're providing critical resources that help to provide that important access and information. And of course, all of our consul generals, all of the consulates that have made themselves available. I know just yesterday I was meeting with Ambassador Moctezuma Barragan from Mexico. We were meeting with our Consul General from Mexico yesterday, and everyone is working to find the best path of being supportive and to help be a resource in these very difficult and terrorizing times for people. But I also want to make it clear is that while we can provide all of these resources, and as critical and as important it is, we know that they still remain under duress, that many people in our community remain fearful. And so while we are providing all of these protections that substantially are not really different from what we've already been practicing as a city for decades, we must continue to encourage and help support one another during these very difficult times and to help aid people where they need it, because they are only going to be pushed further into fear. And it's for that reason that I know this, while important, doesn't really get to the root of what we know we're going to be grappling with as a city, as a country. And so for that, colleagues, I'm grateful that we are codifying this policy, but it has, to be clear, been our practice. And we will continue to make that our practice here in the city of Los Angeles, because we recognize that we are a city built by immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Price, followed by Councilwoman Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today I rise to voice my strong support, along with you, for this ordinance. As a representative of one of the largest migrant communities in the city, ensuring the safety and well-being of my constituents is a top priority. Given the re-election of Donald Trump and the consistent hate speech towards undocumented people and mixed-status families, I can't think of a more pressing issue than this one today. Sanctuary cities are not just a legal framework, but they represent a moral commitment to upholding human dignity, protecting families, and ensuring that everyone, regardless of their immigrating status, can live without fear. Establishing this ordinance will allow us to ensure that crimes do not go unreported from fear of deportation. It will permit us to build trust between mixed status families and law enforcement, and it will help keep communities intact. Now is the time to make our message loud and clear. Trump has had his say, but now it's our turn to respond with decisive action and full force of law on our side. The City of Angels must live up to its name. We must be angels to our undocumented neighbors, guaranteeing that they can live with stability and without the constant threat of deportation. By fostering opportunity and inclusion, we empower all of our neighbors to contribute fully to the strength and success of our communities for generations to come. Colleagues, I urge an aye vote on this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Padilla, followed by Councilman Soto Martinez.
You know, colleagues, I'm really glad we're doing this. I think this is a step in the right direction to protect our migrant, immigrant, undocumented community. But I would also be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to say a few things that are on my mind. Since November 5th, 2024, I have been called very often by different stakeholders asking me what happened to the Latino community and why did they shift over to voting red. And the only answer that I can really think about is my own actions from 2020, when I vividly remember talking to leaders in the California Democratic Party, and I told them, you are at risk of losing the Latino voters if you do not start to utilize your own power to begin conversations to elevate to the national level the interests in the Democratic Party caring about true immigration reform. And all of that fell on deaf ears. So instead, what you're starting to see is that people went with the party that at minimum is willing to start to talk about it. Maybe not in their best interest, but they were willing to at least talk about it. So today, to all of the future federal leaders that are going to take over very soon, I tell them this, that with this action today, what the LA City Council is trying to say is that we're not gonna allow for the actions that once upon a time took place in 1954, where with Operation, I don't choose to use a second word, or what happened in the 1970s when they did massive deportations and broke families. Los Angeles is not gonna let that happen. But instead, what I hope this starts is a conversation to potentially get what we got back in 1986 under a Republican administration, where we actually had something related to true immigration reform with the Immigration Reform and Control Act under President Ronald Reagan. I hope that what this does really does stem a new conversation about the future of immigration reform, because in Los Angeles, what we want to do is protect and make sure that our communities are not broken apart. So I will also be a yes vote today.
Thank you. Councilmember Soto Martinez, followed by Councilmember Harris Dawson.
Thank you so much, Council President. First of all, I want to thank all the folks that were part of this legislation, Councilmember Rahman, Councilmember Hernandez, and others who helped shape this. And of course, the advocates and the organizations and immigrants who came here today to give their own testimony about why we need to make the city of LA a sanctuary city. Because this law is about making Los Angeles, through law, a sanctuary city and ensuring that all Angelenos can interact with our government without the fear that Donald Trump's deportation squad is around the corner. This is a man who appointed the guy who put kids in cages to be his immigration czar. A man who said he would deport every single undocumented person in the United States, including the people that have been here for decades. And just yesterday, he confirmed his plans to send the US military into cities like Los Angeles to carry out his orders. As I was growing up in Los Angeles, my own parents were undocumented. And at the time when my dad dropped me off or picked me up from school, he wasn't worried that ICE agents were going to be there. When him and I and my family members were out in the streets, street vending, we didn't have to worry about being stopped and asked for our papers. And when we got home, we felt the safety and dignity that we all deserve, because the fear of deportation is not present the way it is now. And over those years, my family and my parents were able to provide for our family. They even bought a house, and they both proudly became American citizens over the years. So that whether you know it or not, every single person in this room and every single person watching knows someone like my parents, and they know someone that will be affected by these policies. And we know that women should be able to report domestic violence and seek justice. Kids should be able to go to school, and families should be able to go to public libraries without the fear that doing so would tear their families apart. So by passing this law today, we are making sure that we are keeping our friends, family, neighbors, and coworkers safe. But I gotta say, this is not the end, this is the beginning. We are, in a few weeks, we're gonna have to be leading a movement against this terrible, terrible regime that has taken over Washington, D.C. And I think there's many more things that the city of Los Angeles could be doing to make sure that we are the best city, the best model city for America. So we got a lot of work to do, but today, let's celebrate the win. And again, thank you so much, everyone that worked on this today.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris Dawson, followed by Councilmember De Leon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members who brought this forward and shepherded it through. Couldn't have been more timely, and all the members who've spoken today. I just want to reiterate to the people of Los Angeles who are listening, those of you who are around, as Ms. Rodriguez alluded to, when this happened the first time, it was very different for this city. I talked about last week that in South LA, a block away from Normandy Avenue Elementary School, ICE trucks parked with people just waiting to watch families go to school and decide which ones they should question or stop. You saw people in the parking lots, ICE agents in the parking lots of grocery stores, knowing full well the people most dependent on supermarkets are people with small children. And they just wait and talk to people. And this time, the proposal is that plus the United States military. And there's no reason to believe, if we know anything about the person who just won the election, we know that their bark is their bark, and their bark matches their bite. This puts at our doorstep a situation that can interrupt the peace that we have, the productivity that we have, and this place where, with all of our problems and shortcomings, people have, one, decided to live, and two, people can raise their family. The other big dynamic that we have to prepare for, in addition to what we've done today, and I agree there's much more work today to do. People don't call the police and report crime. People don't call the police, especially and report domestic violence related crimes. And sometimes, and this happened in my district, a house catches on fire and no one calls the fire department because nobody wants to invite the government in and risk deportation because you're trying to put a fire out. And so we have a big job ahead of us. This gives us the foundation and gives direction to our city departments to do, frankly, what they've been doing for decades and generations, but codifies that and puts us in a position to scaffold and build upon that to maintain Los Angeles as the kind of place where we can all live in peace, we can continue our productivity, and where we can lead the nation as a city of immigrants.
Councilmember De Leon, followed by Councilwoman Hernandez.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, I want to rise, and I also want to recognize Ms. Hernandez, Mr. Soto Martinez, as well as Ms. Rahman for bringing this measure forward. This is very special to me in particular, given that I am the original author of Sanctuary State. Trust me, back in 2016, it was no easy feat in the state legislature to move forward and making California, not a particular city, but the whole state of California, the 5th largest economy on planet Earth, an actual sanctuary state, being the first state in the nation to declare ourselves, but with legal teeth, not symbolic, not performative, but with real symbolic teeth. So much so that then Attorney General of the Department of Justice, Jeff Sessions, actually came to California, came to our home turf, came to Sacramento, to be very specific, to announce that the Department of Justice would be suing the state of California and myself, and we would be going to court on this issue. Well, we made sure that we could pass constitutional muster, understanding that once we move forward a measure like this, that we'd be sued and litigated almost immediately, that there were limitations within our powers to make California a sanctuary state, given the fact that ICE agents from Homeland Security can enforce federal immigration laws. But what can we do as a state and what can we do as a city that reflects our values and our principles of who we are and what we come from and what we stand for, knowing that we don't want to utilize local government or state government resources to aid or abet, to collaborate, to cooperate with Homeland Security and ICE agents based on the color of one's skin and, more importantly, in this case, your legal status. So that battle was not easy, by no stretch of the imagination. And dealing with the lawyers and dealing with then Attorney General Eric Holder, who is at Covington Law Firm right now, and working with him, knowing that we would be litigated and we would actually end up in a federal court. So much so, we actually ended up at the U.S. Supreme Court. We went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, even with Trump nominees on that Supreme Court. And we passed muster. They ruled actually in our favor, knowing that we cannot utilize, if we have the right to do so, utilize local resources to aid or abet ICE agents to detain and eventually deport an individual due to their legal status. LAPD is to serve and protect. LAPD is to enforce our local laws here in the city of LA, just like in San Diego, just like in Santa Ana, just like the county sheriffs as well as highway patrol. Those are not federal tax dollars. Those are local and state tax dollars to be utilized for the enforcement of our own city and state laws. So as we move fast forward in 2017, and I thank you for the individuals who were here back in 2017 and for your leadership as you took Special Order 40, which was far-reaching and way ahead of their time with the LAPD, and I got to recognize LAPD for that. But you took Special Order 40 and you made it into an executive order, in this case, an executive directive 20. So sort of kind of copy and paste and copy and paste and copy and paste as we move forward, and here we are today with this motion. And as we codify or we make it statutory, you know, it's obviously the right thing to do. But we have to be very careful too, que no engañamos a la gente, that we don't mislead folks too, that there's some special force field that we have because of our undocumented status. Because aside from being the original author of Senate Bill 40, or Senate Bill, I should say 54, and along with the hate that came with it, and along with all of the death threats that came with it, and I had to have armed security for quite a number of years of all the death threats that came with it. More importantly to me, why it hits here harder is because I'm the youngest child of a single immigrant mother with a third grade education who came here as an undocumented immigrant herself, and a woman who's just as American as anyone else. And the sad part about this, and I think we all agree with this, is that we have so many of our people here still undocumented because of the lack of leadership in Washington, D.C. I know Ms. Imelda Padilla made reference to IRCA, the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, that then was passed by then President Ronald Reagan in a bipartisan manner with the Democratic leadership of the legislative branch of Congress. Fast forward 40 years, close to 40 years, we're playing defense. We're playing defense, we're playing defense, and we're in reactive mode. But so be it, because that is what it is now. Given the fact now that they have the trifecta. They have the bicameral legislative body in the Congress, the U.S. Senate in the lower house, the executive branch, and now the U.S. Supreme Court, because they play the long game in terms of the federal bench as well as the U.S. Supreme Court. Unfortunately, we don't do that right there. But that's why it is important that we move forward with this measure. I do want to recognize the folks have moved it forward together. I'm happy that we've been able to establish it, so it wasn't that complex. Didn't take a lot of legal deep analysis, or amendments to do this. Just look it up, cut and paste, and we move forward. But I want to thank you, and I want to thank Council President, for what I would believe be a modest, moderate, and appropriate amendment as well too. Trust me, I dealt with the same issue up in Sacramento, and you don't want to serve on a silver platter to the Trump administration, and more importantly, his political operatives, to do what they will most likely do. And we saw what they did in the presidential elections with some of the commercials. So I just want to raise my voice to support this measure as we move forward with Senate Bill 54, which evolved into ED 40, which now evolves into item number 52. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hernandez, followed by Councilmember Krikorian.
Thank you, Council President. The city of Los Angeles is the best city in the entire nation because of the 1.3 million immigrants that make this city run. From the food on our tables to the people in all the different economies, it's the 1.3 million immigrants that make our city the best city in the nation. And today, the message to that community is that the City Council of Los Angeles is with you. We are with you. We will fight alongside you. We will protect you. And we will work together to make sure that our families stay whole. And that's what today represents. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Councilmember Krikorian.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to thank the authors and all of my colleagues today for the important comments about this important step that we're taking today, and particularly about the need to ensure that our immigrant community here in Los Angeles understands that we understand their fear that Councilmember Rodriguez so eloquently described, and why that is important that this council, especially at a time like this, especially when we've heard the announcements that we've heard from the president-elect, that we understand their fear and that we will take action to ensure that we're not a party to the destruction of families and the disruption and division of our city. And so I think it's very important that we move forward today with this, this measure, and I thank the authors for that. I also want to add a little historical context because it's important for the public to understand a little bit of that as well, and what we're not doing. Because I know that, you know, the phrase sanctuary city has become the subject of the most immense demagoguery around this country by, you know, folks on the left and the right, frankly. And so I want to make sure we understand, you know, what the city's history on this has been. Some folks in the public even described how embarrassing it is that the city hasn't taken action on this earlier. Well, 45 years ago, Police Chief Daryl Gates, not seen as a friend to communities of color or vulnerable communities in this city, Daryl Gates established Special Order 40. So when Fox News says that we're doing something wild and crazy here, let's remember that 45 years ago, this city enacted Special Order 40. And Special Order 40 has stood without change through 10 chiefs of police and 7 presidents of the United States of both parties. Why? Because it is essential to public safety. First of all, because it's essential to ensure that our immigrant communities don't have to live in fear that the Los Angeles Police Department is going to be going and enforcing immigration laws, but also so that we can ensure that our immigrant communities know that they can come forward to the Los Angeles Police Department and be witnesses to crime and report crimes and not be in fear that if they do the right thing, that they or their relatives will face deportation. That's why Special Order 40 mattered 45 years ago and still matters today. Since 2014, for the last 10 years, it has been the policy of the Los Angeles Police Department not to honor any ICE request to hold an individual otherwise eligible for release from custody absent a judicial determination of probable cause for that detainer or a valid warrant from a judicial officer. For the same reasons, because we want to make sure that our communities, our residents know that we are not going to be a party to expediting their deportation or to enforcing the federal immigration laws. Because the Los Angeles Police Department does not have the resources to do that, it's not our job, and it's not consistent with the values of our city or our city council or the Los Angeles Police Department to do that. The LAPD has never participated and will not participate in the voluntary program established under federal law to allow LAPD to enforce immigration laws. We have never done that, and we are not going to do that. And then in March of 2017, under Mayor Garcetti, of course, there was the executive directive, his executive directive number 20, to even broaden and make clear that Los Angeles will not be a party to ICE efforts here to enforce federal immigration laws, where the primary purpose is federal civil immigration enforcement. No employee of the city would assist or cooperate with or allow any city monies or resources to be used to assist or cooperate with those sorts of federal actions. So this has been the practice and policy of this city in one way or the other for almost a half century, and it has worked. And so we need to, and the progress that we've made in improving this to make sure that our communities feel safe has also been beneficial, not only to those communities, but to all Angelenos, because it makes all of us safer. So I hope that the demagoguery that undoubtedly will begin at a national level as soon as we pass this ordinance will also be mindful of the fact that by enacting this ordinance, by the continuing practices that we've been engaged in the city for 45 years, we are actually keeping Angelenos safer. That has to be a part of the story of what we're doing. We're not only just keeping immigrant communities safer, we're keeping all of us safer by enacting this ordinance. So again, I want to thank my colleagues for their hard, difficult work in creating an ordinance that actually codifies all these great practices that we've been engaged in. And when the amendments come back to us, I will be proud to support this ordinance.
Thank you. And I want to add my voice as well to the chorus of strong support for this measure. While we're not making any big policy change, as many of my colleagues have expressed, we have been doing this. We have been a pro-immigrant city for a number of years. We know that there is a target on our back from this president-elect, and what we are doing here is we are hardening our defenses. We are codifying our good policies on protecting immigrants. We are making that bold statement that we stand with our immigrant community, and we are hardening our defenses, and that's why I join all of my colleagues and thank my colleagues for raising this in strong support. Councilwoman Hernandez.
Thank you, Council President. I would like to move to add an amending motion, 52C, to request that the City Attorney's Office draft an urgency clause with this ordinance, please. Thank you.
Great. Mr. McCosker seconds.
So,
Hot seconds, lots of seconds. But so without objection, we can include that, or do we need a separate vote on that?
No, Mr. President, it might be best, just to make it clear, to have a formal vote on 52C, and if that passes, then on 52A as amended by 52B and C. But first, if the council can vote on 52C to request the city attorney to add the urgency clause, please.
Okay. Seeing no members on the queue, we'll open the roll for 52C, the urgency clause, asking the city attorney to include that. So open the roll, close the roll, and tally the votes.
13 ayes.
And the final vote will be 52A as amended by 52B and 52C, sir.
Okay. I think all the members have spoken already, so let's open the roll, close the roll, and tally the votes.
13 ayes.
Yes, and we'll move this forthwith, without objection. Ms. Hernandez, do you have something, or is that what you were going to request?
I just wanted to request that we move it forthwith.
Got it.
Thank you.
We're on the same page. Yeah. Okay, it is passed.